Welcome everybody to Building Bridges for America's Dem-A-Palooza event tonight. We are going to focus on voting rights, and we are very privileged to have Destiny Wells Scott. She is running for Secretary of State of Indiana, and we have Linh Nguyen, who is running for DeKalb County Recorder, that's in Illinois, recorder and clerk. But before we jump into this event, I am going to tell you guys all about Building Bridges, who we are, and what we do around here. So give me just one moment. I'm going to share my screen. Give me just a second. Sorry about that. So welcome once again to Building Bridges for America. This is our Dem-A-Palooza event. Building Bridges is a all-volunteer national grassroots organization, and we came to be after Pete Buttigieg dropped out of the 2020 presidential race, and he asked all of his supporters to get behind all of the down ballot candidates and Joe Biden, and Building Bridges for America was formed. Now, Building Bridges has a mission, a vision, and values, and our mission is that we are guided by the principles of servant leadership, and Building Bridges mobilizes and empowers networks of relational grassroots organizers equipped to support campaigns and causes based in progressive values. And our values is that we recognize that effort adds value regardless of the result, and we are committed to the development of a broad and inclusive coalition. And of course, we conduct ourselves in our actions and are informed by the legacy of Pete Buttigieg's 2020 campaign rules of the road. And our vision is a just and equitable democracy safeguarded by an informed and engaged electorate where everyone is valued and belongs. Now, everything that Building Bridges does, we do through these lenses because we strive to inform and engage ourselves in the work of delivering racial equity, bridging the rural and urban communities, reforming our democracy, and creating a sense of belonging. Now, Building Bridges has a lot of programs and trainings and discussion groups. And if you look over on the left-hand side of your screen, this is one of our discussion groups. We have a virtual book club, and it starts on the 25th of this month, and we are going to read Merge Left, Fusing Race, Class, Winning Elections, and Saving America. I'm very much looking forward to this book club. And we're going to be meeting on Monday nights at 8:30 p.m. And we usually meet for about an hour and a half to 2 hours to discuss the book. And we have different special guests. We have been very privileged that almost all of the authors of our books have joined us to partake in the discussion. And if you look over on the right-hand side of your screen, those are all of the courses and trainings that Building Bridges for America has, and they are deep and wide. Everything from storytelling training to pop that disinformation bubble so you can learn how to spot and combat disinformation, how to make the hard ask. We even teach you a little bit about civics. There are 11 different trainings that you can take. And they're all just very, very well done by our veteran volunteers here at Building Bridges. And then, of course, we have our days of action, and you are at one of our days of action. So thank you so much for being here. Our days of action primarily is where we work for our candidates. On Wednesdays, we meet for Lights, Camera, Action. That's our movie and postcards night. This week, we're going to watch Lean on Me as we write postcards for 13 endorsed candidates. And then on Sunday, that is our Games for Change event, and we write postcard and play games. But sometimes we invite the candidates to come along and for a town hall Q&A, and we're going to have one of those tomorrow with Jim Obergfell. And yes, the Jim Obergfell. I am extremely excited for that event tomorrow night. And then, of course, we have our Dem-A-Palooza. And tonight we're going to be writing postcards and letters to our senators, asking them to put forth some voting rights legislation so we can save our democracy. And how do we support our candidates? We support our candidates through text banking, phone banking, postcards, and Q&A town halls. And you can give us a follow on social media at Building Bridges, 4America.com on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. And you can learn more about Building Bridges for America, or you can learn more about us at buildingbridgesforamerica.com. And if anybody has any questions, about building bridges, just go ahead and put that over into the chat. I know I just gave you guys a whole lot of information about all of these different events and the things that we do, and I will be putting links for all of that over in the chat here in just a couple of minutes. So without any further ado, I would like to introduce our candidates that are joining us tonight. First, I am going to introduce Linh Nguyen. She is running for DeKalb County Recorder and Clerk, and that is Illinois. Linh, would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Well, first, thank you so much for having me here tonight. I am honored and I'm grateful. So a little bit about me. I'm currently served or an instructor, chemistry instructor at the Northern Illinois University. I earned my doctorate degree in computational chemistry in 2013. And I pursued higher education because that is the only legal way for me, an immigrant, to change a life from poverty to a better life for myself and for my children. So after completing my PhD, I did my postdoctoral fellowship and secured the first tenure track professorship. And then I gave up my dream job to move to DeKalb, Illinois in 2016 because my spouse got a job at the Northern Illinois University. So that in itself is an entire different story. If you guys ever host an event to talk about the motherhood penalty pay gap, I would be more than happy to share that story too. And my daughter, she was born in 2019, and suddenly it hit me. I want her to grow up in an environment without any ceiling or barrier to stop her from achieving her dreams, her ambition. So I felt compelled to be out in a community to make the world a better place for my daughter, for my son, for others. Plus all the crazy thing that Trump was doing in the office in 2019. So I joined the League of Women Voters of DeKalb County, and I was elected the president in May 2020. And as president of the League of Women Voters of DeKalb County, Illinois, during the historic presidential election 2020, I revitalized the league in DeKalb County. Under my leadership, the league set and accomplished many goals, including 18 voter registration events in the 5 months that leading to the November 2020 election. We also host numerous candidate forum. And during that experience, I also learned that there are practices and policy in DeKalb County, Illinois, which is a blue state, but there are practices that designed to keep certain group of citizens from participating in our democracy. So I were outraged. So I stepped down from the president position to run for the DeKalb County Clerk and Recorder office. And I will make history as the first Asian American woman to hold a countywide office when elected to the DeKalb County Clerk and Recorder.
That is awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here, Linh. I'm looking forward to talking more with you here in just a few minutes. So I'd like to welcome our other candidate who is joining us tonight, Destiny Wells Scott. She is running for Secretary of State of Indiana. So Destiny, if you'd like to tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm Destiny Scott Wells, and I am running for Indiana Secretary of State. It's okay, it's a mouthful. Back to being a mom and working, I keep Scott because my military name's still Scott. So I don't want to mess up my paperwork by taking my married name. We're laughing over here. Nessa and I are laughing, so if you can't see it. So anyway, I'm running for Secretary of State. And why am I running for Secretary of State? In 2016, I left I practice law. I'm an attorney by trade, and I left to go to Afghanistan and deploy as a U.S. Army intelligence officer with Intel Security Command. So I go in, it's mid-October, and I go in under the leadership of of President Barack Obama. He is my commander-in-chief, and I am thinking in a couple of weeks, we are going to vote in the first woman commander-in-chief, and I am just so thrilled. And then in the early morning hours after the election, because I'm, in a different time zone, I'm watching all of these hopes and dreams I had of serving under a woman commander-in-chief just kind of crumble as a gentleman across the office is cheering, and he's like the antithesis of who I would want to be leading another man. I think, like, honestly, ladies, he had like sexually harassed me a couple weeks before, and so I'm just like, where are we going? And I felt that feeling for the next 13 months serving with NATO in Afghanistan. NATO comes up all the time now, right? And so I had been a bit politically agnostic because I had served in uniform for so long, and I decided I wanted to do something when I got home, and I ended up being a deputy attorney general for the state of Indiana and taking some more government positions and getting involved in the Democratic Party. And this position just seems so right to me, because if I fought for democracy abroad to try to help others achieve democracy, if I see that democracy is backsliding in our own country, why wouldn't I put all of my effort into that here? And so with the Indiana Secretary of State's office, while it oversees many divisions, the most important division right now for a lot of voters is the election division. And so that is what I am putting all my energy into on the heels of 2020 and what we continually see in the news come to light of how close we were to being victims of election subversion. And so it is so vital that we get the right people elected into these individual Secretary of State's offices across the country, so something like that cannot happen again. And that is why I am running, and I know that there are national security professionals running for office across the US like me, stepping out and trying to save democracy on the home front. So that is a little bit of why I'm running. A couple other things about me. I'm a mother, and I have an entrepreneurial spirit, so it makes sense too. With Secretary of State, we oversee the small business division, and I am a leader in the Indiana Democratic Party too, always trying to build those coalitions that we know are so hard, and that is in part, I'm sure, the mission of building bridges. And I thank you all for your work.
Well, thank you so much for that, Destiny. And thank you to the both of you for being here. It's always a pleasure to be able to hang out with Building Bridges endorsed candidates. And it's even more of a privilege that you're both ladies. So it's really awesome. So thank you so much for being here. So we're going to listen to a song. And then when we come back, we're going to ask our candidates some questions. So everybody who's here, go ahead, start pouring all of your questions into chat, and we are going to listen to this song real quick. So give me just a second here.
Is the most powerful non-violent tool we have in the democratic society. We must not allow the power of the vote to be neutralized. We must never go back.
1, 2, 3, 4. Voting rights we're fighting for. 5, 6, 7, 8. We cannot afford to wait. In 1865, justice was for some denied. The abolitionists stood bravely to denounce the cry that we the people form the union and deserve to see for every man and woman, black or white, equality. Frederick Douglass, 1865.
I am for the immediate, unconditional, and universal enfranchisement of the black man in every state in the Union. Without it, his liberty is a mockery.
Mary Church Terrell, 1912.
What could be more absurd than to have one group of human beings who are denied rights working to prevent another group from obtaining those same rights?
So
Dear Martin, we know that while it's necessary to say no to racial injustice, this must be followed by a positive program of action. The struggle for the right to vote, for economic uplift of the people.
1870, the 15th Amendment gave every man a chance to vote. And now it's 64, and they still trying to keep us away from the ballot. You say, honey, I'm behind you. Well, move. I don't want you back there. I want you to say, honey, I am with you, and we'll go up this freedom road together.
It was more than 100 years ago Abraham Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation. A century has passed since equality was promised and the Negro is not yet equal. The time for justice has now come. No force can hold it back.
The sad irony of the court's decision today lies in its utter failure to grasp why the Voting Rights Act has proven effective. Throwing out pre-clearance when it has worked to stop discriminatory changes is like throwing away your umbrella in a rainstorm.
That was a good one. I really like that song. Okay, so I am looking over into the chat and we have got questions rolling in. So we are going to start with Lin Nguyen. Let me see here. And this is from Melissa. Lynn, can you tell us how your childhood makes securing democracy so important for you?
Thank you, Melissa, for that question. So I grew up in Saigon, Vietnam, right after the wars, and my family fought alongside American troops. So many of my uncles and cousins died or went missing during and after the war. And the stories that were told by my mother behind closed door and in quiet dark nights. And she told the story how her neighbors next door, the entire family, to disappear overnight. And she heard screaming and crying. And she and my grandmother were just praying that nobody gonna knock on their door, because her dad already passed away. My grandpa passed away, and her older brother was a captain in the Marine fighting alongside American troops. And at that point, they had no idea what happened to him. Years later, we found out that he was sent to the re-education camp. But this is really important. The entire family disappeared overnight, and you heard nothing from that. You don't hear anything from the newspaper. You don't hear anything from local. Everybody just quiet, like they didn't even exist the night before. So in a country that run by authoritarian government, the people have no right. And it's scary. It's scary because you can't do anything about it. There's no non-governmental organization. Everything controlled by the government. And so at any instances, anything could happen to you, whether it's righteousness or unrighteousness, you cannot do anything about it. So that's very scary. For voting rights, they have election but it's more like a mockery of democracy, because somebody from the Communist Party will win. Everybody know that, but my parents were escorted to the polling place by an armed police officer to cast votes that they know didn't count, but they forced to cast their vote. So all of this teach me to celebrate and appreciate the fact that our votes matter. Our votes matter. If it didn't matter, why are they trying so hard to stop us from voting, right? Just after January 6th, there's 152 bills that were introduced in 38 states, trying to see who can have control over election administration. So the bills trying to consolidate power and trying to increase partisan influence on election administration. That's scary, because in America, your votes matter. And so now when the people vote and the people choice is something that state legislator don't like, they want to have the power to change the people will. That is scary. And that's why I want to run for election authority, because at local level, like DeKalb County, there's a lot of things that designed to keep certain group, student voter, renters, minority voters. They're trying to keep those people from voting. So it's harder for them to get on the voter roll. It's harder for them to stay on the voter roll. And the polling place where they go vote, they only have to wait hours before they can cast a vote. And I want to change all of that, because that's unfair, unjust. And I have a plan. I'm a scientist. I'm making data-driven decision, and I want to be able to see that every eligible voter in DeKalb County should have equal access to the ballot.
Thank you so much for that. I mean, what a journey for you, and how far you've come. And DeKalb is really lucky to have you running for office. So, if you could explain for people that do not know, what role does a county clerk and recorder play in voting rights and in elections?
Is this still a question for me?
Yes.
Okay, so so as a county clerk and recorder, so for counties that have population over 100,000, like DeKalb County, we just tap a little bit over 100,000. We have a choice to have two offices, the recorder side or the separately, so recorder and clerk separately, but the people vote to have the two office consolidated for cost saving, which is fine because we only barely over 100,000. So the clerk office is in charge of election authority. So DeKalb County is home to Northern Illinois University. So we have a diverse, large, young population, but because young voter, they are mover and shaker, right? So they move a lot, and I pursue higher ed, so I know I have to move when I go to graduate school. I have to move again when I go do my postdoc, and then I move again when I get my first job. Now in DeKalb County, every time a student moves, even if they just move from one room to another room in the same resident hall, they got kicked off the voter roll. And it's not state law. State law only require the address, the street address, not the unit or the room. But this is something that that being done at DeKalb County Clerk office. So students got kicked up the voter roll all the time without knowing. So when they show up on election day at the polling place where they had voted in the last election, they find out that they no longer are the voter roll. Now, luckily in Illinois, they are allowed to register and vote on election day. But how many students actually show up to their polling place with two forms of ID? And additionally, they always don't staff enough people at polling places near the university. So the student will have to get in line for a long time to be told that, hey, you have to re-register. You need two forms of ID. So they have to go home and bring it back. How many students actually come back after waiting in line for 3 or 4 hours? So that's the one thing that I can change. Also, a week a few days before the election 2020, the DeKalb County clerk closed the one polling place at Northern Illinois University Home Student Center before the election in November 2020. So that's the thing that I could change. I could put that polling place back right in there at the Home Student Center. That would be the first thing that I could do. If I have more time, I can tell you about other practices that being used to keep certain group of voters from participating in democracy in DeKalb County. There are more. Would you like me to continue, or should I stop here? I do have a lot of stories.
Well, I know that you are going to be joining us really soon at a Building
Okay.
Bridges Town Hall, and I will file that in my memory bank, and we will discuss that
Okay.
at our town hall for sure. But we have lots of questions for the both of you rolling in. We're going to ask you a few more questions, Lynn, if you don't mind.
Okay.
So Christy wants to know, how would you address voter roll purging?
So right now, I think the easiest thing we could do here is to fix the fact that students who live in the same residence hall and did move from one room to another, which they do that all the time, like almost every semester. I think we can work closely with the university housing authority, because the university have an incentive to have the student participate more in voting. So they actually form a task force called Democracy Challenge. And that task force is trying to improve the voter turnout among students. So if we work closely with the university housing authority to inform the student that every time you move, you need to update your address, re-register, then that would help prevent the long line of students show up at the polling place and find out that they're no longer on the voter roll. So communication gotta be better. Same thing with people who live in apartment complexes and not on campus, on the university housing. We can work with the local apartment complexes management, right? We can talk to them, hey, hand this out, to keep up with the communication. Like right now, there's nobody, well, it's not nobody, but like majority of the people who live in DeKalb County have no idea what the DeKalb County Clerk and Recorder Office is supposed to be doing. They have no idea what are the responsibilities. The county clerk and recorder office have a terrible website that's not mobile friendly. So if you want anything, you have to access the website from a computer. If you try to do it from a smartphone, you wouldn't go anywhere. So communication is terrible. And when there's no communication, no transparency, just last week, he sent out the new, after the remapping, he sent out the new voter registration card with the wrong polling place. And the press release was 3 sentences hidden in his website, and people were confused as like, what's going on? Why my polling place, all the polling place now at the county clerk office? And the press release just say that there was a mistake and we printing the new card. No responsibility, no accountability. Who gonna pay for the new batch of 64,000 voter registration card? We don't know, probably taxpayer. So the bar is so low. Anything that I do would improve everything.
Yeah, it sounds like there is a lot of room for improvement there, for sure. Thank you so much for your answer. Okay, so Christy wants to know, Virginia has 500,000 AAPI voters, but their participation in election does not reflect the numbers. I know this is common across the country, but how do you engage voting in the minority populations?
So this is one of the main reasons why I'm running for office, right? AAPI community always seen as the forever foreigner. And there's a reason for that. I grew up in Vietnam. Every time we hear the word politician mean ruthless people. who in charge of the authoritarian government. So no good people want to be politician. And so that kind of mentality kind of translate when we come to America as immigrants. The teaching from the timid immigrant families, keep your head down, keep your mouth shut, don't rock the boat, just keep it quiet, work hard, study hard, become doctors or lawyers, serving the community that way are acceptable, but not in public services. And because you cannot be what you cannot see, right? So growing up, AAPI kids don't see faces like mine or people with accent like mine or names like mine in the public services, then it diminishes turnout. They still confused. They say, is it home? Is it not home? Are we part of this? So for me to go against my family teaching, go against my nature of being an introvert, to put myself out there, it's really hard, but I think it's necessary. And so just the fact that I am out in the community running for office, I was just invited this last week to go to the Asian American Resource Center at Northern Illinois University to give a guest lecture. I was never given opportunity like that before. And now they give it to me because they want the Asian American student to see me and to learn about me. So I think changes start very small. It's starting with me. And I think for other community, it's gonna take some AAPI leader to step up and do the hard work. It's hard. Running for office is hard. Everybody is just kind of judging me and just like make all sort of assumption about me. And it's so hard to put myself out there, but I have to do it. I have to do it for myself, for my community, for my children, and for better humanity.
Yep. Where you going? Huh? Where you going? I was going to go to the store and grab, you want ice cream? Sure. That's what I want. I want ice cream.
I like
let's grab 'em.
caramel. I like caramel swirl.
Microphone is on. Could you please?
Oh, I'm so sorry.
That's okay. That's okay. Okay, so we are going to ask one more question to Lynn, and then we are going to move on, and we will circle back before the end of the event. So Christy had another question. Do you support having countywide voting locations instead of forcing voters to go to dedicated locations?
So in DeKalb County, we actually have at least, because of the state of Illinois, it's state law. So we have to have at least one location where anybody in the county can go and vote on election day. And that is the DeKalb County Clerk and Recorder. So people would have the option to go there to vote on election day, or they can go to their local polling place. And many people, they prefer the local polling place because it's very close to where they live, but they do have the option to just go to one location and vote. Doesn't matter where they live in DeKalb County. And I do plan to not only maintain that, but expand that. It doesn't have to be just one location. We can identify different pockets that have a lot of people, and we can put additional location like that for the entire county.
Great answer. Great answer. Thank you so much. So we're gonna move on with the program. I'm gonna play another song, and then we are going to jump into questions with Destiny Wells Scott. If you want to put your questions for Destiny into the chat, I will be sure to get to those. So give me just a moment here, and share and X. And yeah, that works.
Caught in a bad romance. Caught in a bad romance. Vote,
Whoa, whoa, won't I stop? Ah, ooh la la, till we have suffrage. Whoa, whoa, votes whoa, whoa, won't I stop? Ah, ooh la la, till we have suffrage. It's gotten ugly, they passed the 15. Still women have no right, no guarantee to liberty. Child health, wealth, or property. We'll raise our banner across this land, 'cause franchise isn't just the right of a man. You love her so, yeah, 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 to love her so. You know we don't want to take freedoms from you, just want our rights and nothing less. We cry for freedom, oh, hear our voice and see we're equal to all men. We the whole people, not just male citizens, form this most perfect union. Caught in a bad romance. Caught in a bad romance. Votes whoa, won't I stop? Ah, ooh la la, till we have suffrage. It is a horror, a cruel design that makes it criminal, a right that is mine. I want the vote. Vote, 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 I want to vote. Well, I think you're psycho, I think that it's sick. I'm queen of my home, raise my babies, that's it. Don't need to vote.
No, no, she don't want to vote.
The rights of citizens shall not be denied or abridged by the United States on account of sex. We cry for freedom, oh, hear our voice and see we're equal to all men. We the whole people, not just male citizens, form this most perfect union. Caught in a bad romance. Caught in a bad romance. Votes whoa, won't I stop? Ah, ooh la la, till we have suffrage. March, march, be courageous, fighting for our rights. We may just start greatness for the ages. Freedom, it is contagious. March, march, be courageous, fighting for our rights. We may just start greatness for the ages. Remember the ladies, not to be above, but equal to all men. We only ask to be part of this union. Comme dirait le français, c'est démocratie. Permettez-moi participer. I'm a citizen of this nation. An American. I want suffrage and independence. We cry for freedom, oh, hear our voice and see we're equal to all men. We the whole people, not just male citizens, form this most perfect union. I wanna wear pants. Caught in a bad romance. I want my suffrage and independence. Caught in a bad romance. Votes whoa, won't I stop? Ha, ooh la la, now we have suffrage.
All right. I absolutely love that video. Love that take on Lady Gaga's song. So thank you, Lynn, for your portion of the Q&A. So now we are going to move on to Destiny. It is so great to have you here. So I'm going to ask you the same question that I asked Lynn earlier. For people who don't know, what role does the Secretary of State play in elections and in voting rights?
So the Secretary of State for Indiana, they're all different, right? I mean, some oversee multiple different types of divisions in Indiana. There are multiple divisions, but you ask about voting rights, and so that's the election division. And I have to avail that I live in what is called a red state, even though we are confident in this race that we are going to prove that we are not so red that everybody thinks. But we have suffered years of gerrymandering. In fact, we brought in some experts who assessed Indiana. I say we, but it's really some of my girlfriends that are active in an organization, and we were found to be one of the most gerrymandered states in the US. And so what that means is that we have for decades now been suffering from lines that are not reflective of Indiana, that are the biggest impact for racial discrimination, really. And so we are in a Republican supermajority legislature, and we have a Republican executive branch and Republican AG. And so we have a Republican Secretary of State. So the Secretary of State, when elected as a Democrat, will be able to push back against these Republican supermajorities and really educate the voter on what is going on in Indiana. So for example, you will hear a message out of the Indiana Secretary of State's office that we are a model state in elections. However, we are 46th in the nation in voter registration turnout, as I stated. So we are not a model state at all. And we need a Secretary of State who can educate, who can push back, who can influence, and who can also help those counties and people like Lynn, her counterparts in Indiana, do a better job in helping to administer fair and free elections.
Great answer, Destiny. So Tracy wants to know, are 17-year-olds who will turn 18 by election day permitted to register in your state? If not, would you work to make that change?
I will say that is one of the things that Indiana does right. And I'm not sure if it's because young voters who haven't left home are perceived more to vote Republican, but voters who turn 18 by the general election are allowed to not only participate in the general, and register before the general, they can participate in the primary. So we are one of a handful of states that does open up access to voters so long as they do turn 18 by the general election.
Great. That's awesome. I'm so glad to hear that they're doing that right, at least. So Christy would like to know, would you support auto enrollment for voters through something like Social Security or the DMV?
Okay, so Indiana has a 29-day voter registration deadline. By federal law, you are only permitted to have up to 30 days. So again, we are of a handful of states that use very suppressive voter registration measures. So of course, I would love automatic voter registration. It has obviously been found to be very successful in the states that utilize it. Not only would I support automatic voter registration, I would also support same day voter registration, because often we have voters who, they don't think about elections until a couple of weeks before elections, right? And then they find out that they are not registered and they don't have enough time to register. Indiana has been found twice to have violated the Voter Registration Act in 2016 and 2018 by not giving due notice to voters when they were purged. So higher than that threshold that you would want to see, and just healthy maintenance of the voter rolls, we surpass that. So absolutely support automatic voter registration. Yes, we need all the help we can get.
All right, thank you for that. So what is the status of voting drop boxes in your state right now?
We do not have voting drop boxes. We did have some ballot collection bins during COVID, but Indiana is not a drop box state. And I mean, I would support drop boxes if done in a secure way. I don't believe in there's this concept of ballot harvesting that is really pushed by Republicans, even though they were proponents of ballot harvesting, I want to say like in the 80s when it was more beneficial to them. But we in Indiana do not have the drop boxes in place.
Okay. So scanners have drastically reduced waiting times for voting locations. Would you push for funding for all locations to upgrade to TOS and technology at voting locations?
So I'm going to answer this in a more expansive way. Indiana, as far as election security and with technology, because our issues are even bigger than scanners. We are one of 5 states who still, the majority of our counties use what are DRE machines. So those are the electronic machines. I think only 7 states use them in total. We have one of the vendors in the state of Indiana that may be part of the contribution as to why we still are using DRE machines. And so we passed legislation so that we want, if funded, by 2024 to have what are these printers connected to our electronic machines. They're called VVPAT machines. This I did not advocate for this. I showed up and I testified against it. This is one of the biggest threats to election security are these electronic machines. Not only are they subject to hacking, they're subject to issues like calibration. So when you hear somebody say like, I voted Democrat, but it changed over Republican, that could have just been a calibration issue. So we in Indiana need to start having the best practices as far as introducing technology into our voting process. So any type of those measures, I would make sure to assess, and not only just assess as to what, may be the accepted practice in Indiana, but also what is the accepted practice of federal organizations like CISA.
All right, thank you. Thank you so much for that answer. And explain that for us a little bit. I appreciate that. So Tracy is up in Massachusetts, and they do not require voter ID or ID for voters up there. Can you ever see that happening in Indiana?
I do not believe that we will see it happening. So what what we're having to message is that voter registration in Indiana has been happening for a while. We were one of the first, we were the first state to have strict voter ID. In fact, the opinion that went up to the Supreme Court that gave states the latitude to have voter ID in the interest of voter confidence and public safety, because we hear voter confidence all the time message from the right side of the aisle. That it was something that evolved out of Indiana. We're always like the culprit of really bad things. I'm sorry, you all. There's like Indiana and Texas, but Indiana is one of 7 states to have strict voter ID. What is strict voter ID? That is a government issued ID that has your photo. So the ship has kind of sailed in Indiana as to the discussion of whether to get rid of voter ID. And so we have that. And then I even am up against across the aisle, one of the Republican candidates who wants us to have to prove our citizenship at the polls to include providing your birth certificate. So while I may be a personal proponent of opening access to the polls and being very familiar with the issues of equity, of financial access that allow for strict voter ID and how they inhibit equity in voting, that is not really an issue in Indiana that is ripe for discussion in the 2022 election, unfortunately.
Oh man, and I'm down here in Florida, and I thought our voting rights were pretty bad off, but that's horrific. Them trying to bring in birth certificates as proof of ID. That's horrific. Okay, so I'm going to ask you one of the questions that I asked Lynn earlier about Virginia having 500K AAPI residents, but the participation is pretty low. So how are you going to encourage voting in the minority populations in Indiana?
I appreciate that question. So I kind of wear two hats. I have my candidate hat, and then I'm also a deputy chair in the state party, and I'm the deputy in charge of basically our coalition building. And I was very optimistic when I entered that role that we would be able to bring in groups like our AAPI community and give them a seat at the table of the party. And it's been a little harder than I anticipated, and not by the fact that AAPI community, I can speak to that community in particular, although that we have multiple communities, veterans, seniors that want a seat at the table, but it gets mired in the traditional voting structure of the state party. And so we cannot let these traditional structures stop us from getting communities involved in voting. And so I was at an event today, and it was a women's event. And now that I've done this for a couple of years, I said, thank you so much for organizing at the local level, because that is what it takes. You cannot wait for the state structure to come in and help activate communities. It has to be localized. That takes reaching out to them, acknowledging them, and as a party structure, eventually I hope they can do a better job of providing the resources to those groups. But first and foremost is to make sure that they know that they are seen and that their voice matters. In Indiana, for example, AAPI community has been targeted heavily against by a Republican attorney general, and a lot of xenophobia coming out of that office that was being parroted by the pre 2020 administration. And so we have to make a stand. It's so important to get a Democrat elected so that they can stand up and be that voice in government in a very red state like Indiana is right now, represented but not truly reflective of the population.
All right, thank you so much for that. So I have one last question for you, and it comes from Melissa. And she said, does Indiana allow anyone to request an absentee ballot for any reason?
No. And then in fact, in the legislature this year, they tried to scale back what mail-in voting we had, what absentee voting, because in Indiana, absentee is considered early voting and mail-in voting. We do not have an expansive mail-in voting program. And then as far as you can vote early in person, right? And so we have some counties moving over to vote centers, and some counties are increasing access. A lot of it has to do with the local leadership and what they want, not necessarily what the state wants. But as far as mail-in voting, to answer your question, we are not a no-fault state. Like you have to have a reason why, and it is a limited list of reasons.
Okay, thank you so much for that answer. So we're going to move on with our program, and we are going to watch a short video, and then we are going to come back and hear one last time. We are going to hear one last time from Destiny and one more time from Lynn. So if you guys give me just a moment here, we're going to go ahead and screen share and do this. Oh, yeah, that's what we're going to do there. Okay.
Please stop scrolling. We inherited a broken system, and we've been living in a broken system our entire lives.
Members of Congress make $174,000 a year, and congressmen who go on to become lobbyists receive, on average, a 1,452% raise.
Why does democracy, the Freedom to Vote Act, and dark money matter to young people? Dark money is blocking progress on so many issues that young people care about, such as affordable health care, climate change, student loan debt, and so many other issues. Almost every issue can be tied back to an extremely powerful lobbying industry.
The Freedom to Vote Act stops making it so hard for our generation to vote. Polling sites would be on every campus, same-day voter registration, and it would make Election Day a national holiday.
It stops billionaires and corporations from buying our politicians and completely removes dark money from politics.
You too can support this bill by calling your senators and expressing your support for it. You can also support hunger strikers working to get this bill passed by going to hungerstrikefordemocracy.org. You can also visit unpack.org for more information. Remember, you are the change.
Usually the voters get to pick the politicians. In redistricting, the politicians get to pick the voters.
This is Thomas Hoffler, the mapmaker who helped Republicans gerrymander districts over the last decade. When Hoffler died in 2018, his daughter found thousands of his emails and files, which she shared with activists. The files show that Tom Hoffler's fingerprints are all over the way America's political maps look today. But North Carolina was his masterpiece. And if you want to understand why gerrymandering is such a big problem in the US, that's a good place to start. The basics of gerrymandering are actually pretty simple. If you're a Republican trying to keep power, you want to do two things. First, pack as many Democratic voters as possible into a single district. If you have a district where almost everyone votes Democrat, that means almost half these votes are basically wasted. You can also crack big Democratic areas into separate districts where there are slightly more Republicans. So even though an area has a lot of Democratic votes, they would actually lose in this district and in this district. These are the two elements of classic gerrymandering, packing and cracking. And Hoffler employed these techniques masterfully in North Carolina. In 2011, he was hired to redraw the state's political lines, and for congressional districts, he came up with this map. Now I just want to focus in on District 12, this weird skinny shape. In order to make sense of this shape, we have to look at another map. This map shows the percentage of black people in each neighborhood. The bluer areas are where more black people live. Hoffler basically gathered up black people in Winston-Salem, Greensboro, and Charlotte and packed them into one district. So that's how District 12 happened. Hoffler also did this with North Carolina state representatives and state senators. For example, here are the state senate districts. Here, he packed Winston-Salem into one district, and then packed Greensboro into its own district. These new districts helped Republicans get a stranglehold on power in the North Carolina State House. And over the next few years, they were able to pass crucial legislation.
A strict new voter ID law in North Carolina.
Which bathrooms transgender individuals can use in North Carolina?
In 2016 and 2017, federal courts ruled that both of these maps were unconstitutional. They said what North Carolina Republicans did wasn't just gerrymandering, it was racial gerrymandering, done to deliberately dilute the political power of black people. The court said the Republicans in the North Carolina State House now had to redraw the lines without looking at racial demographics. So, they went back to Tom Hoffler.
Back in the day when they started this new world, they decided it should be ruled by the people. But they weren't talking about black people or women. So when it came to voting, you had to be white with a penis and own some land. These white men understood that the people who vote have the power to elect those who govern, and those who govern make the laws that keep them in power. But at some point, the US fought a war with itself, and black people came out on the other side with a few rights. One of them was the right to vote, for black men at least. Now that they were voting, white dudes realized they had a problem. These black people can vote us out of office. Wait, I got an idea. Since we made it damn near impossible for them to read while they were enslaved, let's make a literacy test that they have to pass in order to cast a ballot. But of course, black people started passing the test. And then the powers that be thought, I know what. You know how we don't have slaves anymore, but we still could use free labor? How about we arrest them, charge them with a felony, and exploit them for work? And then we got a double win because we'll make a law that prohibits felons from voting. And for those we don't lock up, we'll just keep them poor and charge them a poll tax. Today, you can't call a poll tax, but that doesn't mean the bullshit still doesn't exist. We got voter ID laws that cost taxpayers a lot of money. They mainly hurt black and brown people and reduce voter turnout. And we still got felon voting laws, even though a couple of years ago, the people of Florida decided it was time for former felons to be able to vote. But Republicans were like, nah, that's gonna f our numbers up. So they threw another roadblock. Felons today have to pay all of their court fees before they can get in the booth. So if you don't have a few $1,000 laying around, no vote for you, buddy. And look at this nonsense. You see this jigsaw piece that doesn't look like it fits anywhere? It's a district map that manipulates the vote by putting power all in one place. You see, all this slickery trickery, it's about power. And the voters give power to who they elect. And those they elect want to keep this power. So they do their damnedest to control who votes. So when they say your vote is your power, they ain't lying. The tactics just keep coming. In Texas, they only have one ballot drop box per county. Do you know how big the counties are in Texas? In Georgia, people are waiting in line for more than 10 hours to vote, as if they're giving away iPhone 22. In California, they're burning ballots with fire. And voters in Florida, they're getting threatening emails trying to punk them into not voting, saying, vote Trump or else. Or else what? You know, this is some sneaky shit that's happening right in front of our faces.
When I first got called about coming down and bringing money, I called Sidney and I said to him, listen, what you doing this weekend? And he says, nothing, man, I'm free. And I said, well, I got something I got to do, and I'd like you to go with me. And I said, I got to go to Greenwood, Mississippi. And he says, listen, it's okay, I'm going with you. But after we do this, I want to tell you something. Never, ever call me again.
He said to me that he was going to speak with Robert Kennedy to let him know that we would be coming down. I mean, we're two fairly well-known people, and we might be targets.
Trust me, man, it's going to be all right. I talked to Burke Marshall, talked to the Justice Department. They're going to have marshals. So we get out. We left from Newark. And from Newark, we went into Jackson. And we got on this little plane. And when we landed in Greenwood, it was empty. And all we saw was one black man in the whole airport pushing a broom, cleaning up the place. And I'll never forget, Sidney looked at him, he looked around a little longer, and he said, that don't look like no FBI.
That ain't no FBI.
That ain't one of us in disguise. We was all these marshals. When we got in to the cars and started up, all of a sudden these headlights went on. And I turned to Sidney and said, there's your protection. Willie Blue said, Marshall's my ass. He said, that's the Klan.
We knew they were going to try something. And we figured that they wasn't going to do it inside the airport where too many people would see.
The front car was a pickup truck. And I'll never forget, the pickup truck had a big 2x4 block of wood strapped to the bumper. And as they came up behind the second car, they kept ramming it.
That was one of their most common tactics. They hadn't really started shooting in cars, you know, they would just run us off the road. And that was my...
This year alone, over 400 were introduced in 48 states to restrict voting rights.
All right. So we are back. And I really liked that story about Harry Belafonte and Sidney Poitier. And I don't think it's a story most people have probably heard before. So you both are running for office. Destiny, Secretary of State. Lynn, you're running for County Recorder and Clerk. So I'm going to ask the same question to both of you. And Destiny, you can go first this time. So you're in an elevator and you find yourself alone with an undecided voter. In 3 minutes or less, convince me why they should vote for you.
Are we role playing here?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Just what is your elevator speech to get someone to vote for you?
Okay. Well, you wanted me to convince you. So I usually try to make it a conversation, which I think is what some candidates don't do. So I would ask you, I would break the ice and talk to you a little, but I would try to figure out what your values are. And if your values are being lived every day through the political process. And what I like to tell people about the Secretary of State's office and why I love running for this office is that this is not a race where I am trying to change your opinion on anything. It is very likely, because we are in the state of Indiana, that my opinion is not the same as your opinion on many things. But this race is about opening up access to the ballot box and making sure that your opinion is heard, whether I agree with it or not. And that I am the one that you want to leave the keys with at the end of the day. I have a life that has exemplified service. I joined the military when I was 19 years old. It is the only lens that I know how to look through as an adult, and that I am friends with people from all different walks of life and from all political opinions, and that I even break bread with Republicans every holiday because that's my family. And that I want to illustrate that on the heels of the pandemic and what has been a very divisive time in the US, that we can come together and that we can put a country before party and humanity before our differences. And so please let me be in charge of how elections are ran in the state of Indiana. And I promise you that I will serve you, I will serve your family, and I will serve Hoosiers with the utmost ethics and fortitude to always do the right thing, even in the face of partisan gamesmanship. I think it should be completely off the table. I have had friends give the ultimate sacrifice to try to uphold the notion of democracy abroad. And so that and it just pains me so much to come home and see it be manipulated. So I want to ensure that that was not for anything or for nothing, and that we are truly a representative democracy, and that every voice is heard and every vote is counted. So please vote for me, Destiny Wells, for Indiana Secretary of State.
Thank you for that very powerful answer, Destiny. And if you guys would like to learn more about Destiny and her running for Secretary of State, or if you want to volunteer for her campaign, or if you would like to make a donation to her, you can go to wellsforindiana.com to find out any of those things. And I see that somebody threw you a donation over as you were talking in the chat. So yay for that. And thank you so much for being here, Destiny. So Lynn, I am going to ask you the same thing. You are running for DeKalb County Recorder and Clerk. And for everybody who doesn't know, that is in Illinois. And you're in an elevator with an undecided voter, and convince them to vote for you for county recorder and clerk.
Okay, so Destiny, I probably try to have a conversation, and I have an accent. I have a foreign accent, and that will come across really quickly. And I would try to, instead of run away from that, I would embrace this. And I would tell them that my accent tell my stories, and my story is one of courage, determination, and excellence. So from there, I would tell them that growing up in Vietnam gave me more than just an accent. Growing up in communist Vietnam taught me to cherish democracy, and fair election are the heart and soul of our democratic government. And I believe voting rights are very sacred to me. Voting rights are very sacred to me, and I believe that every eligible voter should have equal access to election. Additionally, my training, my PhD training as a computational scientist, and my experience as the president of the League of Women Voters will qualify me to deliver secure, fair, and accessible election, and to maintain effective record keeping. I will improve tech-based communication between the DeKalb County Clerk and Recorder Office with voters, communication changing constantly, especially with the speed of technological advancement. Elected official must communicate clearly, efficiently, and effectively with their constituent. With better communication comes transparency and accountability. I will empower voters to hold me and other elected officials accountable for our action and inaction. I also understand that the DeKalb County records hold our history and need to be respected, protected, and cared for properly. I will ensure efficiency and clarity so residents can access their records with confidence and ease. And I'm a mother, a wife, a scientist, caring resident of DeKalb County, and with your help, I will become our next DeKalb County Clerk and Recorder.
Well, thank you so much for that answer. I appreciate it. I love that you talk about your story so much and tell your story about like where you came from and how you like came up, and I absolutely love that. Telling your story to grab the ear of a voter is my favorite way of all of the different tools in our democratic tool belt that we have. I have the nickname in Building Bridges, they call me the Republican Whisperer, because apparently I speak Republican and I can flip a lot of votes. So and the way I do that is through storytelling. And so I just appreciate that so much. And I am so excited to see what happens in DeKalb County. I am so excited to see what happens in Indiana. It has been an absolute pleasure to have both of you ladies here with us tonight. Just thank you so much. And Building Bridges has a very, very full week this week. And I just want to touch base on our week and tell you guys what we have going on. So tomorrow we have our Games for Change Town Hall, and Jim Obergfell is going to be joining us. Just a refresher on who Jim is. He is the person who sued the United States of America and got us gay marriage. So that is who is joining us tomorrow. And then on Tuesday, we have Unlock Your Political Power. And that is that storytelling training that Lynn and I were just now talking about. And it's so important. And that is going to be on Tuesday at 8 o'clock. And then on Wednesday, we have Lights, Camera, Action. And that is our movie and postcard event. We are going to be writing postcards for 13 of our endorsed candidates here at Building Bridges. And we are going to watch Lean on Me, which is a terrific movie if you've never seen it. And then on Thursday, we have Say This, Not That. And that is that all important messaging training. And that is going to be at 8 o'clock on Thursday. So those links are over in the room. Go ahead and grab them while I'm wrapping up this event and continuing to talk. Yes, Building Bridges for America. We just kicked off our postcarding program. I believe it's been about 2.5 months now. And in 2.5 months, our volunteers have written 15,000 postcards for our endorsed candidates. And you can write postcards for Lynn Nguyen, who is here with us tonight. And Destiny, if you haven't gotten us any postcard addresses, you should do that, because our volunteers would love to write postcards for you.
I'll talk to Mary.
Yes, get them.
For sure.
Get them over to Melissa and Christy, and we will be more than happy to begin writing postcards for you as well. Oh, and I am so sorry, I forgot to mention, Lynn, if you would like to volunteer for Lynn's campaign, if you would like to learn more about Lynn, or if you would like to make a donation to Lynn's campaign, you can visit her website at winwithlynnwin.com. And I put that link over in the chat as well. So thank you everyone so much for being here. Dem-A-Palooza will be back in 2 weeks. We are going to be focusing on the Justice and Policing Act, U.S. Senate candidate Alan Ellison, and Barbara Gaskins, who is running for U.S. representative in the District 3. We have a lot of candidates. It's a lot to remember. In District 3 in North Carolina. So it is going to be a powerful event, and I'm really excited. Lynn, Destiny, thank you guys so much for being here. I appreciate you so much.
Thank you so
Everybody
much.
else who is here tonight, thank you so much. We can't have this event without volunteers, so we appreciate you as well. Everybody have a great night, and thank you so much for coming.
Bye.
We'll see you
Thank
guys
you.
next time.